Hey everybody, it's Jason Calacanis, and today on Startup Basics, brought to you by our friends at Wilson Sonsini. Yes, that's right, WSGR, Goodrich Rosati. I always have to remember to say the full name. And we are going to talk about, God, one of the most difficult things to do as a founder is to know when to quit, when to pivot. And this is hard because I think, giving you just a little bit of context over it, entrepreneurs are generally confident people who are driven, who don't take no for an answer, who are stubborn and resilient. And so those are all great qualities. And a lot of times being stubborn and resilient will let you break through a wall. A lot of times it will let you run into a brick wall and get knocked out cold. And so that is the fine art of when to persevere and when to pivot. There's no right answer, but I can give you the signals. And I'm going to give you the signals first of why it might be time to pivot. And I think some of them are internal and some of them are external. If you as the founder are having a hard time getting motivated by your idea, you don't want to go to work in the morning, you're dreading going to the office. Now, I'm not saying dreading going to the office because it's hard, because somebody quit and you have to hire somebody, or somebody's being difficult, or money's running out, or you lost a client, or the product is crashing, or the servers are going down, or you got hacked. Those are all, tiny moments when a startup can just be incredibly hard to run. Those are moments in time. They pass. And any great entrepreneur will let those moments pass. They'll be the rock in the stream, the water will go by, and this too shall pass. What I'm talking about is just consistently, you just don't want to do it anymore. You're like, oh my God, this is just completely not interesting to me. So when you lose your interest as a founder, oh my God, that's what kills most startups. I believe that the number one killer of startups is running out of money. And the number two killer is the founder running out of energy and interest for the idea. If you find that happening, you're going to have to face it yourself and say, hey, either I have to extract myself from the business and let somebody who's interested in this vertical take it on, or you're going to have to find something you're personally interested in. And that leads to a second one, which is, hey, are the folks on your team interested in the idea, or are they phoning it in? Are people staying late? Are people coming to you with ideas? Are people vocal about their concerns about the product? If people are just quietly coming to work and leaving at 5 o'clock and you don't see that passion, maybe there's something wrong with the product. Maybe the product is not that great. Now, you can have an efficient team doing a great job. And I'm not saying every day has to end at 9 p.m. But if people just don't seem to be engaged, that's a red flag too. So there's your internal, are you engaged? There's the external, are your team engaged? And will people come work for you? I mean, if the idea, when you tell it to people, results in them saying, I want to come work for you more often than not, great. But if you put out jobs and you're like, hey, come work at my startup, we're going to try to revolutionize news on a mobile phone, and it's inside.com, and people are not interested, well, you got a problem. And if you're not interested in going to work, you got a problem. Now, in this case, I'm super interested, and I have a lot of people who are very interested in the future of news and mobile. So we don't have that issue. Okay, not time to pivot. Now, what would be, so another moment is also VCs. Now, VCs are not like the barometer of anything necessarily, other than greed or, a perceived opportunity. And, they're going for returns in large part. I mean, there are some people who are in it for the thrill of the victory in the game, but generally it's a return-driven business, and they're investing other people's money. So you have to think, if VCs don't want to be involved, they probably think that this is not an opportunity for growth. So if your startup, and it should, if it is in fact a startup, desires growth, and your team desires growth, and it's not growing, VCs are a pretty good indication of that, because they'll look at it and say, hey, it's not growing. Why is it not growing? And they're pretty astute at this, actually, because they see so many companies. They know it's not growing because either it's a bad market, you picked a beach to surf on where there's no waves. You could be the greatest surfer in the world. If there's no waves, you're not going to actually be able to do anything awesome. And so that leads to the product. Is there traction? Are people bubbling with ideas? Do users ask you why certain features are broken? Do they notice when something breaks? Do they notice when something is added to the product? If they don't notice when things are broken or added and they're not enthusiastic, well, you got a huge problem, right? So if the customers are not enthusiastic, the VCs are not enthusiastic, the team is not enthusiastic, if you're not enthusiastic, these are all the warning signs. Now, that do not mistake a lack of, do not mistake a difficult day or week or issue and a frustrating fight and a debate with a lack of enthusiasm. In fact, it's the opposite. If people are fighting over which direction the startup should go in, and people are cantankerous, and there's meetings, and people are like, hey, we should be doing this. We should be business to business, not business to consumer. No, we should do enterprise. No, we should do consumer. We should be going after this market segment. We should be doing advertising. No, we should be doing subscription. When people are having those fervent debates, that's good. That means there's something there. There's life. When there's no debate and everybody's just quietly checking in, checking out, and keeping their head down, man, you're effed. And that means it's probably time to think about doing something else, to pivot. Now, what is pivot? Now, does pivot mean you change your ideas? Well, it comes from pivot foot, right? Like in basketball. It means you're kind of keeping one foot in one place and moving the other foot. So you're building on one move, right? So you're sort of starting another move, but it's got its basis in a previous one. You're shifting, but you're not completely reinventing. And there's a lot of different ways to do this, and there's been a lot written on it. But what I think are some of the main things to keep in mind is if you have a great team, it's much easier to have a great team with a bad idea because they'll figure out how to make it great than to have like a great idea and give it to a bad team because they'll certainly screw it up. And I'm not the first person to say this. I've heard a bunch of VCs say this and other people say it. Ideas can be iterated on and you can kind of sniff your way along. And that's what really pivoting is. And so there's like kind of major pivots and minor pivots. A minor pivot is, hey, we thought we were going to, build this software that we're building for accountants, but it actually turns out that ad agencies like it. It's like just like sort of a different consumer segment wants to use the product than the one you thought. That's like a minor pivot, right? A major pivot is like what Groupon did. They made a message board for people who wanted to create like petitions. And then they made a little WordPress blog to get coupons for a pizza discount. And it turned out more people were interested in the pizza discount than, whatever, getting the orcas freed from SeaWorld. So it turned out the point became Groupon. Groupon soared. Doesn't mean one idea is better than any other idea. It just means one might grow faster, right? So like the point might have been a wonderful idea. It just wasn't a high growth idea. And when Andrew Mason was on the program, he told the story on This Week in Startups of how, hey, everybody in the company just wanted to work on what was working. They wanted to be successful. People want to be successful. Remember we talked before about people being quiet and maybe not engaged? Well, if the product's working, they get engaged. Trust me, when Mahalo was going down and we couldn't get the SEO problems fixed, people got disengaged. When insights started coming up and it started growing, everyone's like, hey, wow, this is fun. There's a higher quality product. People like it better. And just naturally, even me, the leader, I was like, wow, I'm more engaged. And so don't be afraid of pivoting. Love it. Embrace it. Another technique is maybe going more focused or becoming, a bigger, wider focus. So some people start and say, hey, I'm going to build, a content management system that's specifically for people in fashion. And then they say, well, you know what? Anybody can use this. So why don't we just pull back a little bit and let anybody use it for anything they want, right? So that's a sort of, I'm going to go with a tool or a community for a specific vertical to I'm going to be a platform. And I see that all the time. Hey, we can't get the people who we built this to use it. So we're going to let anybody use it and see what happens. That usually results in great, great things. Now, technology is one of the best things to pivot on. When we started Mahalo.com, which had become very large, 15 million uniques, but then got killed, the mobile phone was nascent. I mean, we remember the launch of the iPhone when we were there. And it was really the iPhone coming out that led us to say, hey, human curation could be done on a phone. And it's better to do it there because people have less screen real estate. So it actually matters. Rewriting the headlines and doing a more efficient experience for news consumption works better over here on mobile phones. And so the whole world changed because of mobile. It's a giant pivot for everybody. And there's many of things like that. Now, the business model could also change. Consumers have changed. The idea that consumers would pay in advance for something that was not built, also known as crowdfunding, is a completely revolutionary new way to do commerce. I'm going to give you money because you gave me a pitch for something that's just so awesome that I want to see it exist in the world. Or crowdfunding in the sense of, hey, you're a great artist. I want to just give you money every month as a reoccurring donation. Like this really changed things. And people started applying it to everything, local businesses, movies, hardware. And nobody ever thought that hardware would be the place that it would really take off, to be honest. They thought it was going to be movies and local restaurants. It turns out hardware has been totally revolutionized, from the Pebble to the Ouya, and now this cooler on Kickstarter became the largest thing ever. So that's an example of the business model allowing you to pivot. Technology could let you pivot. The client base could allow you to pivot, and so can the business model. Another thing that is one of the most frequent ones is to go from consumer to enterprise. Why? Consumer leads to a lack of scale in most cases. Most consumer services fail. They fail at an extraordinary rate. It's one of the most difficult things to do. So if I do inside and I can't get past 10,000 people a day, I could say, and if you can't get past 10,000 people a day, you can't make any money. But if I went to IBM and said, hey, I'll make inside.com for your 100,000 employees and give me $10 a year per employee, give me $1 million, and I'll make content for your company so your 100,000 people for $10 a year are really up on the content of what's going on inside of IBM and inside of the technology industry and all the markets. They'd be like, sure, here's $1 million, go. We want that service. I'm not saying I'm going to do that, but that has been pitched internally. That's like an internal debate. Like, should we go enterprise? We're not going to, but it is an interesting play. You could do it and it would work. I'm not interested in it. I still think we're growing, but actually if I did hit the wall, I might, we got to keep the company going. Maybe I'll pivot to that. And consumer needs. A lot of times consumers will tell you just explicitly like, hey, dumbass, you're giving me this. I don't care, but I do love this. That has happened so many times in technology where people think, people are going to use this device, I'm holding up my iPhone, to make phone calls, and it's going to be wonderful. And then it's like, well, no, it's actually kind of like SMS messaging and apps and playing Clash of Clans. I mean, who knew that the iPad and the phone, or just a humble phone, would become a gaming device? Like, that really wasn't the intention. But a technology enabled that, which was the technology of video graphics processors getting so small. And then the App Store created monetization, right? So there's two enabling moments there, arguably three. The creation of the smartphone, then two, the creation of the App Store for monetization purposes. In-app purchases was another one. Wow, it's almost like a mini enabler inside of that people could pivot to, because that's really what made Clash of Clans and those kind of games work, was the in-app purchases, micropayments, $1, as opposed to buying a game for $60. It kind of like they boil the frog. You spend $1 every day or $3 every day. I didn't think I would go back to putting quarters into an asteroids machine at the age of 40, but I started playing Bejeweled, and I was like, yeah, you know what? I don't want to save up all these coins and have to then get the prizes. Just I'll give you guys $10 a week to play my stupid game. Then I realized, oh my God, I'm in 10 weeks into this. I give them $100 for a game that shouldn't cost that much. Anyway, point is, little things can enable big changes in your business, and you'd be foolish to not watch them. So listen to your team, listen to your partners, listen to your customers, listen to the VCs, listen to the press. I mean, that's another one that if the press is not interested in meeting with you, it's because you're boring and what you're doing is not important. And I don't mean that to be harsh, but in a lot of cases, if the VCs don't want to meet with you, if the press doesn't want to meet with you, and people don't want to go to work for you, it's like red flag, red flag, red flag. I mean, are you going to persist when the entire world tells you that they are not interested? In some cases, I guess, 1 in a million, 1 in 1,000, 1 in 100, perhaps you should persevere. But almost universally, some group of people, 5, 10, 20%, will fall in love with your product. And that tends to be the sweet spot. When Twitter had 5% of the population in the United States kind of interested in it, 1, 2, 3% of the techies, and then it became 5, 10%, and then Ashton Kutcher and other people got involved, and it became super populous. Those were amazing moments, I think. But they had to persevere in that small percentage of the population using the product to get to the big one. All right, listen. Thank you to our friends at WSGR. They have been so great doing the Startup Basics series with us, and people are going crazy for the series because, let's face it, startups are hard, and there's some very basic things that people need an answer for, and you're busy, I'm busy. If we can just do a little bit of research, and thanks to the team for doing this research today, not all of this is my ideas. A lot of this is sort of researched and discussed by our editorial team here at Launch and This Week in Startups. You can save a lot of time. So we put a bunch of hours of work into this, my experience, my team's experience, and Wilson Sonsini. Thank you so much, WSGR, for supporting this great series. All right, we'll see you next time on Startup Basics.